Good morning and welcome to the Saturday morning QB show with the Johnny Cleveland podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome this morning. Good to have everybody here. And hey, the Buckeyes play this afternoon in about 39 minutes. They'll be kicking off down at the Horseshoe here in Columbus. Very excited about that. So we're gonna talk about Buckeyes today. Some of the other college games. Good to have you here. We're the Johnny Cleveland podcast, and this is your Saturday morning quarterback show. It's been a busy week. Excited to be here again, and been little technical difficulties this morning. Had to rearrange some things, but we're back with our headphones and the studio equipment that we didn't have back on Wednesday. Again, good to have you here. So the Buckeyes play the Nebraska Cornhuskers today. Last year, the Buckeyes played Nebraska in Lincoln and won 48-7 pretty handily. And so we'll see what happens this year. That both teams are reloading. Buckeyes, though, have a lot of players coming back, including the great Justin Fields. Question is, how many touchdown throws is he going to have this season? I know there's been a lot of speculation about the Buckeyes and how they're going to perform throughout this season. Again, they open up today with Nebraska. Nebraska, led by Scott Frost, the head coach. Both the Buckeyes and Nebraska really have a lot to. They really helped with getting Big Ten football going. Nebraska was early on was very adamant about continuing to play. At the beginning, before when they shut things down because of COVID, Nebraska continued to want to play. The Big Ten, of course, had shut down for a while, but since then, the Big Ten came back. Many of those coaches, including the Buckeye coach Ryan Day, put a lot of pressure on the Big Ten. They brought in various doctors too that talked about what they needed to do to have a season. So there's some recent articles over the last week that have talked about how Nebraska is very thankful to the Buckeyes for really helping push to get some Big Ten football back. So it will be great today to have both teams out on the field. They're going to have the game at the Horseshoe. Again, there will only be less than about 2,000 fans, which should only include family and friends of the coaches and the players. So good to have them to be able to watch the game. It is a little bit different atmosphere, but being here in Columbus, the fan base is very, very pumped. Listen to a lot of other various media outlets, and it's good to have the Buckeyes back here playing. Like I said in the last podcast, being in Columbus, it's like having an NFL team. So there's a lot of prep and a lot of excitement. There is a Buckeye sort of pump up the season, get energized for the season commercial that they've put together. And I'm going to play that at the end of the audio version of our podcast today. So when we leave on the audio version, you'll hear that it's about 2-minute little commercials. Very exciting. If you're a Buckeye fan, you will love it. And so we'll play that on the way out of our podcast today. So Buckeyes play. They are missing some players today. I read a report. There's about 12 players for various reasons that are not going to be playing, but the Buckeyes have a lot of additional players, but a lot of the main players will be there again, including Justin Fields. Question is, like with the running game this year with Master Teague, he's coming off of an injury. The running back, what will he look like? Will he be sharing time with Trey Sermon, who's the new kid coming over, the transfer kid from Oklahoma? Anxious to see how they kind of play that out. The kid from Oklahoma is very talented. I look for him to have a very, good season. We'll see how it looks today. Should be able to get some cobwebs out. And I don't know if the Buckeyes are going to blow them out. Again, last year they won 48-7 over Nebraska, but both teams will be kind of trying to figure things out early. I do look for the Buckeyes to win pretty handily toward the end, but it could be an interesting first half. Chris Olave, one of the receivers coming back, should have a good game today, hopefully, and a good season. So looking forward to seeing the Buckeyes play. Next week, they then prepare to play. They go to Penn State. which should be probably of all the games that they've got on their schedule this season, will be probably the most contested at this point. We'll see what Penn State does today. The other couple big games in the Big Ten, I know Game Day from ESPN is over in Minnesota today. They have snow on the ground. So at least we don't have snow here. It did get a lot colder. That's why I'm broadcasting from inside. If you're watching on the Facebook feed or YouTube, back in our lovely condo, and see over my shoulder here on this shoulder, you'll see a beautiful picture of my wife and I from our wedding. And I got the old Browns helmet. Thank you, Mr. Glassick, Coach Glassick out there in Kansas, who made these wonderful Browns helmets for me over the past. So I like to put those in the podcast. So again, thank you, Bruce. So in the Big Ten, Michigan is playing Minnesota tonight. Should be a really good game. I look for Minnesota to have a really good season. I'm pretty much think that they're going to beat the Wolverines. Of course, I think the Wolverines should be beaten all the time. Again, the Buckeyes end up finishing the season against Michigan. They'll be playing them in December. I think the date is like December 12th, maybe. So we'll see how that goes for the Michigan Wolverines tonight. But I look for Minnesota to have a good season, and I think they're going to win that game against Minnesota. Some of the other big games in the just the top 20, you've got Clemson again. They're just playing kind of scrimmages against these other teams. They're so loaded, so good. They're playing Syracuse today, and look for Clemson to run all over Syracuse. Other big games, Alabama is playing Tennessee. Alabama kind of struggled last week, but today they're playing at Tennessee. I don't see that as being too much of an issue for Alabama. They are number two they're number 2 right now. The other big game that I have an interest in, and if you're watching this podcast, or if you're a family or friends from the good old Kansas, they got the Sunflower Showdown today with Kansas State Wildcats against the Kansas Jayhawks. Now, this is a big game, the big game for that state, the Sunflower Showdown. Kansas State traditionally has a much better football program than Kansas. Kansas traditionally has a much better basketball program than K-State. That's the way it's been pretty much for decades. I was first introduced to the K-State KU rivalry when I first moved out there back in 1992, 93. Got to go to one of these Sunflower Showdowns when Kansas State was just starting to get really good in football. And they ended up beating KU that year, and it was a highly contested, low-scoring affair. Kansas State won that game 10-7. So that was my introduction to that. It is very electric. There's full house, and the fans there in Kansas love that game. Again, Kansas State has really dominated KU. Of course, KU's been dominated big time in the Big 12 for years. I think I heard some crazy record like that Kansas is 6 wins and 86 losses in conference play going back like 15 years, which is just awful. Kansas has a horrible football program. They had the one year where they got kind of good and they ended up going to the Orange Bowl, but traditionally Kansas is just terrible. So it should be an interesting game today. Kansas State has had some big wins earlier in the year. I look for Kansas State to win that game. Look forward to watching that too. They'll be competing against the Buckeye Nebraska game on TV, so might have to switch back and forth to that. So those are some of the big games in college football today. And I have a little story about the Buckeyes, the old horseshoe, that I'll share at the end of the podcast here. But it's one of my fonder memories of Ohio State. I've actually never been to a Buckeye game, and but I've been inside the horseshoe for other things, and which I'm going to share here in a little bit. So Browns, let's switch over to Browns. We're going to come back to some predictions with the Browns here shortly, but news yesterday broke that Austin Hooper, the tight end for the Brownies, is out. He had his appendicitis taken out. Harrison Bryant should be getting some better looks. David Njoku, who has been in the news because Mary Kay Cabot in Cleveland Plain Dealer started to suggest that he wanted to get out of Cleveland again. He should be getting hopefully some more playing time tomorrow against Cincinnati. Harrison Bryant, the rookie, also will be getting some playing time because Austin will be out. So Austin's out. By the way, I'm doing an article. I'll be posting that later on, hopefully today, with our new writing at the clevesporttalk.com. Great site. Go check it out. They've got a lot of great articles about Cleveland sports, the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm actually writing an article today about Coach Kevin Stefanski. I've been doing some really interesting look back at his early career, even going back to high school. And I've been saying this a long time for many times over the podcast, but I talked about it again on Wednesday. I think that the reason that the Browns are going to recover today is in due part because of this new coaching staff and because of a coach like Kevin Stefanski. I'll share a little bit more about that in my article that I post later. But, Kevin Stefanski, when you watch him, you listen to him, you listen to the players, he has his knowledge of the game going way back and doing some research, listening to some of the other people that have worked with him over the years. His knowledge of the game and understanding concepts in football is tremendous, and he's steady. I call him Steady Eddie, and I think that that will be a big part of what happens tomorrow. I could be completely wrong, but I don't think you look back at the first game when the Browns played Baltimore and they got blown out of the water. Obviously, I came on the post-game show, the Dog post-game show that time, and I was very critical of the Browns. I did not say that I wanted to run Stefanski out of town like some of my friends have suggested, but they recovered and they went on a 4-game winning streak after that. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen starting tomorrow again, but I certainly think that Stefanski understands the game of football very well, and I think he's got buy-in from his players. The players trust him, and there's a lot of reasons for that. That I'm not going to go into all of that today on the podcast, but I would ask you to check out my article that I come out with later today. It'll be on clevesporttalk.com. All right. So in other NFL news, just a little side note, kind of have to do also with the Ohio State Buckeyes. I thought this was kind of an interesting, cool story that in regards to both. Michael Thomas, the former Ohio State Buckeye who now plays for the New Orleans Saints. He has been injured. Obviously, some of you who follow football, he's not been able to play recently, but saw a neat story where he donated recently $20,000 to a nonprofit organization that is called RIP or RIP Medical Debt. They're a nonprofit organization, and they help put monies toward paying other people's medical bills who can't afford to make those bills down in the New Orleans area. And that $20,000 actually runs into $2 million, became $2 million because of how this nonprofit is able to pay off that debt. And so good job to Michael Thomas, former Buckeye and New Orleans Saint, who made a donation over this last week. I think that was really cool. Good for him. It's nice to see those sports stories. They don't get a lot of fame or claim in the local media, or the national media, but I saw that story because of Myles Garrett had reposted that story, our great defender for the Browns. So I'm glad that Myles Garrett did that, and it showcases again what players do sometimes and we don't always hear about, but good for all of them. So in other games coming up this week, we've the big game tomorrow in the NFL outside of the Browns Cincinnati game is Pittsburgh's playing Tennessee. Both teams are coming into the game. I believe they're both undefeated. Tennessee has not played one extra game because of the COVID period where they weren't able to play. They had to sit out a week, but it should be a very good game. Derrick Henry for Tennessee, I look to have a solid game. Obviously, Pittsburgh's run defense is strong. I do think Tennessee's going to win that game. It will be close, but a lot of you will be paying attention to that game, I'm sure, nationally. Other games tomorrow, Kansas City, the Chiefs go out to Denver and play the Broncos. The Broncos are playing decently, but I do think that Patrick Mahomes will get the Chiefs back in line. I think LeVar Bell or Le'Veon Bell, the running back who the Chiefs just picked up, will be playing as well. So see how he does. So I look for Kansas City to win that game. Another big game. Arizona is playing Seattle. Arizona had the short week. They just beat Dallas. Well, they get to play Seattle now. It's actually Seattle comes to Arizona, and Kyler Murray did a very good job last week against the Cowboys. You're bringing Russell Wilson and Seattle. However, Seattle's secondary, their defense is pretty lousy. They give up a lot of points, so it'll be a very interesting game. I think Arizona's going to pull this one out. Contrary to some of the national media folks, I do think that Arizona, it's a home game for them, and I do see them winning and beating Seattle. The other couple other games, Tampa Bay is playing the Raiders. I didn't see that one coming last week with Tampa Bay and Green Bay. Tom Brady and Tampa Bay went and got down early against Green Bay, and Green Bay's behind Aaron Rodgers. They just fell apart pretty much, lost that game big. However, they're going out to Las Vegas to play this game against the Raiders and John Gruden, the coach. I do see the Raiders this is going to be a very interesting game because the Browns play the Raiders next week. Now, the Raiders have been without several of their offensive linemen this week because of COVID. They've been had to sit out as a precaution. And so we'll see what happens tomorrow. I think the Raiders are going to pull it out and beat Tampa Bay. With that in mind, if the Raiders do win that game, they're going to have a lot of momentum coming here to Cleveland next weekend. So keep an eye on that game, Tampa Bay and the Raiders. Monday Night Football, the Bears, who happen to be 5-1, are going out to Los Angeles to play the Rams. That's an interesting matchup because the Bears actually have done pretty well against the Rams in the past. I think they beat them last year out in Los Angeles as well. They're going to play them again. I think the Rams running game is going to stay strong. I think that's going to help them pull out the win against the Bears. The Bears, I've heard so many people say, well, they're the worst 5-1 team in the land. We'll see. But I'm going to go with the Rams because of the running game in that contest. Now with the Browns, with the Cincinnati game, Joe Burrow is gonna, he's gonna come out firing. Is he gonna throw the ball 60 times like he approached last game? I don't know. They're not gonna have Joe Nixon, the running back. So that'll help. They're gonna the Bengals are missing a couple players on defense as well. Baker Mayfield is still recovering from his rib injury, so that's a concern. But when you listen to Stefanski, the coach, he was, he made a very good point yesterday in his press conference talking about how we're in week 7. And he said most of his players, including Baker, are working through injuries. A lot of these NFL players, they don't go on IR, but they've been injured, and Baker's injured and he's playing through it. That's what NFL players do. So we'll see how this all matches up. I do think Baker will recover. I think Baker doesn't have to have this game where he's just throwing the ball over the field again. Remember, he's needs to be managing these games. And I think that's what worked in the past. By the way, this whole thing that came up this last week, and part of the reason I'm writing this article about Stefanski is because of coaches in the past like Hugh Jackson. Hugh Jackson got on national media, local media yesterday, the former Browns coach who was 3 wins, 36 losses, and a tie as Browns head coach, which is lousy, terrible, should never head coach again. He got on the other day trying to talk about how, well, Baker's in the wrong system. He needs to be in the shotgun and not behind the lineman, and that he's in the wrong sort of system for him to succeed, which is absolutely just nuts, stupid. He has his opinions, like in the fact that local media up in Cleveland give this guy any time of day is just to get ratings. It's just dumb. This guy doesn't have any knowledge. I mean, he was terrible as the Browns coach. And now, the Browns are sitting at 4-2, and he has, he's trying to sell this book that he wants everybody to read. And so the local media up there gives him the opportunity to talk. And, it's just dumb. I mean, when he had 6 games with Baker before he got fired, and Baker and him, there's a long laundry list of things that were going wrong. And the Hugh Jackson's ability to coach, and the number of conflicts that were going on while he was coach, even before Baker and during Baker's stay in Cleveland, was just tremendously terrible. and that's why I'm writing, part of this contrast between someone like Hugh Jackson and Kevin Stefanski is monumental. And it's the reason why I think that the Browns long term are in a much better state of mind going forward. So we'll see what happens. But I saw some of these comments that came out and earlier in the week with Hugh Jackson, just dumb. I mean, the Browns are 4-2. They're not 1-5. They're not 0-6. They're 4-2. And he just wanted some press. So there you go. I even talked about him. So there you go, Hugh. If you listen to my podcast, just a stupid move on your part. All right. So with the game outcome today, I do think that the Browns on Sunday are going to pull it out late. They're going to win 31-27 is my prediction. The Browns running game they had a great game that first time that they played the Bengals. Myles Garrett had a strip sack as well in that game. I look for Myles Garrett to have a very good game, another sack at least. And I look for the Browns to, again, it's going to be one of these games where Cincinnati's going to be hanging around. And, with our defense, maybe even they come down and with a chance to take the lead or tie the game late. But the Browns defense has been relying on turnovers. I do think the Browns are going to get more turnovers this game, and that will help them propel them to victory. So I see the Browns winning it 31-27. All right. So just a couple side notes here before I leave. Wanted to share a little story too about the Buckeyes on my way out. I did want to just, this little political commentary here. It blows my mind when I've heard some conservative talk radio recently with all of this election, with the upcoming impending presidential election. I heard some commentaries even in the last week about voting. Of course, the conservative viewpoint is that they don't like the early voting. They're hearing that from the conservative side of things. The last week, for example, we had absentee voting here where we dropped our votes off at the local board of election. And it was really impressive how many people were voting. They've given that opportunity because of a lot of variety of reasons, but especially right now, we're in the midst of a pandemic. The concern of standing in lines on one day on November 3rd. So a lot of these states and local places and boards of election have opened up so that we can either absentee vote or vote early. So record numbers of people have voted early. I think upwards of 50 million people have already either sent in their absentee votes or have voted in person. So that's excellent. So when I heard the other day, some of these folks on the conservative side talking about how that's just not democracy, that's not democratic, I just have to laugh at that. I don't, the idea that folks are voting, 50 million people are voting, and a lot of people are standing in lines, keeping their social distance to have the chance to vote in this free, wonderful United States of America. For some people on the talking side of the conservative Republican side to suggest that this isn't democratic, I can't even understand that. It doesn't. If you can make sense of that to me, I heard those comments by a couple different commentary people this week in the local radios here. It just does not make sense to me. So I think it's great to see everybody getting out there and voting. Please remember to vote on November 3rd, or if you need to vote early because of your situation, I would encourage you to get out there and vote. So one last little my horseshoe story for the Buckeyes. I've never been to a Buckeye game, but one of my favorite memories growing up when I was in high school, we were part of the Worcester High School General band, and there were usually between 150 to 200 of us that were in the band program, and we would go down and do various shows at different areas. And our senior year, we were invited to go to a band program down at the Ohio State Stadium, and that's when the horseshoe was still open on the one end. And I had the opportunity that game to play with a group of my classmates. I played the trombone, and we had a brass little quartet that got to go in front of our band and play like a little song together. We actually played the song. It was the Flintstones song. So we enjoyed doing that. And we played in front of an empty stadium at the Horseshoe. So that it reminded me that'll be what it's like for the players today when they're playing the game and they look up and there aren't people up in the stands. So it was a fond memory of mine, a memory that I will always remember. There's a photo that I think one of our classmates took that I still have of us playing in front of the group. And it was a great memory. Being from this area in Columbus with the tradition of like the Ohio State marching band, it's doing like the Script Ohio. It is a kind of a neat thing to have been able to perform there in the Ohio State Stadium. Hopefully next year when our pandemic and hopefully things are subsided, I can get to a Buckeye game. So look forward to that. So everybody, I hope you have a very, very good Saturday. And remember, again, the Buckeyes are playing here very shortly. You got 13 minutes before the game starts. So go Buckeyes, OH. And I'm going to leave you here. If you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, I've got this little hype video that the Ohio State Buckeyes put out for the season that I'm sure you will enjoy. And with that, everybody have a great Saturday. And remember, everybody, to keep smiling. We'll talk to you tomorrow night after the Browns victory over Cincinnati on the Dog Post Game Show. Good night.